Cardinal McElroy gone off the rails in the synodal process of inclusion. We're going to have a conversation around.
He wants to overturn the church's entire sexual moral teaching. And in this regard, he's following, I think, most closely the example of Cardinal Hollerich.
Joining us right now via Rome and video chat is Louis Knuffke from LifeSite News. Good morning to you, Louis Knuffke.
Thank you. Thank you. Honored to come on your show.
Praise be to God. Thanks for your time. You have a series of articles over there. I mean, a whole bunch. I would encourage everyone to check them out, and I'll put a link to them in our video chats. But you have two on Cardinal McElroy in particular, one that you just released. I'd like to talk about those if we could. Let's start with the bankruptcy case first. The diocese faces bankruptcy for more than 400 clerical sex abuse claims. Now, I think they've paid out I said 200 million, but it's actually a lot more.
Yeah. So the amount that was estimated for the current cases, I think, was up to 550 million. And back in, I think it was 2007, they paid something like 198 or so, somewhere around there. So these are cases that have been filed since then. They're a result of a law that California passed, I think 4 years ago, lifting the statute of limitations. And it has resulted in these 400 plus lawsuits against the Diocese of San Diego. Now, San Diego has assured its faithful that none of the priests who are accused are in active ministry, but there's a little bit of, I think, tongue-in-cheek there. So in my story, I include reference to a case within the last decade. It was under Cardinal McElroy, at least the investigation was, in which a priest that was found not only guilty, but guilty of a terrible situation of sexual abuse. It turned out to be a satanic ritual rape.
I remember the article.
That priest was kept in ministry for, I think, 2 years after a confession to the actual chancery. So, talk about substantiating something and then not doing anything about it. Not only that, they obstructed the actual investigation, which finally was brought to conclusion by an out-of-state attorney because the victim had moved elsewhere. So, there's It seems like this step to declare bankruptcy on account of all these lawsuits may be just another step to not have to reveal the truth, the full truth about these cases. And that was the objection of one of these advocacy groups. Filing for bankruptcy, it monetarily it might settle things, but it doesn't mean that the reality and the details of these cases are brought forward. And I think that actually is, as a devout Catholic, I think that's important for the church to be upfront with people about these things. If you look at the church fathers, St. Augustine, they expose anything that is scandalous with regard to the clergy. Yeah. They have no mercy with regard to the shepherds of souls.
You quote the Cardinal in your article. You say bankruptcy would provide a pathway for ensuring that the assets of the diocese will be used equitably to compensate all victims of sexual abuse while continuing the ministries of the church for faith formation, pastoral life, and outreach to the poor and marginalized. It would also provide a fund for future claimants of sexual abuse who have not filed a claim. Finally, bankruptcy would provide a conclusion to the tide of lawsuits covering alleged abuse as long as 75 years ago. And then he goes on to say, and as you quote him, we must and will continue to protect minors with every deep vigor, provide healing resources to those who have been abused, and use our diocesan assets to compensate those who are victimized. And we will never forget the harm that we have done, close quote, Cardinal McElroy, as you've quoted him in your article. Now, two things I want to point out there and get your comment and your take on. Number one is nowhere in this statement, of the poor, the marginalized, going to the fringes and that kind of statement. I don't hear anything in here about we're going to use our assets to convert every single soul soul in the Diocese of San Diego because salvation matters for every single soul, not just some of them. I don't hear anything like that in there, number one. Number two, they're beating the drum of minors, while ignoring the post-pubescent abuse that has happened, the adult homosexual activity that has happened. Those crimes seem to go unanswered while they just simply focus and put everything under the label of minors. What say you, Louis Knuffke?
The emphasis should be on the salvation of souls, and actually does get to our two major issues that I think are not faced. One is the issue of homosexuality within the clergy. That is not addressed. Two, this, I'd say new transgender movement that he is actively promoting within the diocese, within his parishes. So I included a link in the article that I wrote yesterday to a previous article about an LGBT mass that the cardinal presided over with another bishop. It was for children and their families. Now, talk about abuse of children. This is it. This isn't just sexual abuse. This is mutilation of healthy body parts if they undergo surgery. This is castration if they're using chemical hormones. I mean, this is extremely criminal. In spite of what the laws of California might allow. And the cardinal is very actively promoting this in his own parishes. So, when he talks about protecting minors, he is the one placing them in danger. Two, he wants to overturn the church's entire sexual moral teaching. And in this regard, he's following I think most closely the example of Cardinal Hollerich, who's a German bishop who last year called for the church to overturn principally the teaching on the sinfulness of homosexual acts, but he also called for a reexamination of all the church's sexual moral prohibitions. And Cardinal McElroy just 2 weeks ago, I think, issued an essay in America Magazine calling for exactly that. He said he thought that the church's teaching that all sexual acts outside of marriage were gravely sinful was wrong. He says, this focuses on sexual activity, whereas we should be focused on love of God. And this is, I think, where, the cardinal could do a little bit of a catechesis for himself. That charity and chastity are unrelated is totally un-Catholic. And the idea that following the commandments has nothing to do with love of God, including the commandments that have to do with our neighbor, is to fail to see how love of neighbor is related to love of God. And to go further than the letters of St. John, in which he condemns those who say, I can love God but not love my neighbor. So you ask a wife whose husband is not faithful, does he love you? And do you think that he loves God in the midst of his infidelity? And she'd laugh at you. So I think underlying these abuse cases in San Diego is a continuing advocacy for, in both teaching and practice, not adhering to Catholic moral doctrine on sexuality. And it's wholesale. The cardinal called into question all sexual acts outside of marriage and the sinfulness of those acts. So those are, I think, some of the major underlying issues.
It's a big deal, the fact that Cardinal McElroy seems to want to give a total pass to homosexual behavior. It's one thing, as you pointed this out, it's one thing to say we understand the concupiscent nature. We understand that people are tempted to commit sins. I myself have temptations. Everyone does. It's what we do when we're tempted that matters, not that we have temptations. And to give people a pass is not only gravely harmful for those people, but it's also clearly a public scandal within the church, to the point where many have actually come out and rebuked him, to include Denver's Archbishop Samuel Aquila came out, and he actually responded to this article over at America Magazine. And he says Cardinal McElroy's reflection paints the church as an institution that harms due to its incapacity to welcome everyone into full participation in the life of the church. He observed, according to His Eminence, the church categorically discriminates, but did not Jesus himself put demands on his disciples which distinguish them from those who did not respond to the radical and costly call of the gospel, close quote, Samuel Aquila, as quoted in LifeSite's article over there. So this is a big deal. We have a prince of the church, not even the first one, just a prince of the church publicly espousing what is gravely harmful to souls, error causing public scandal, and seemingly going unchecked, and then also perpetuating this behavior within his own diocese. This is an issue. We're going to continue this conversation right after the break about His Eminence Cardinal McElroy invoking the synodal process to push LGBT agenda during a university address. You write, Louis, in your article, in his university remarks, while not as explicit as his published rejection of Catholic sexual morality, Cardinal McElroy veiled his denial of the same revealed truths under the guise of, quote, welcome, close quote, and the pastoral need for the church to, quote, transform its outreach to LGBT plus persons, close quote, in order to be effective in engaging modern society. Going on to say, quote, we believe we are approaching a real crisis in how to minister to LGBT plus community. The Cardinal claimed, it's clear that the church in the U.S. must transform its outreach to LGBT plus persons if it seeks to be a truly welcoming presence in the world, close quote. Now, I want to point out that the goal isn't to just be welcoming. The goal is to be transformative. The goal is to help them achieve salvation for eternity, to help them to achieve heaven for all eternity. He seems to be missing the mark here. Louis, what do you say?
Yeah, it's to emphasize inclusion to the exclusion, let's say, of the observance of the commandments, really is to set aside the preaching of the gospel for, an attempt to bolster numbers within the church. And you mentioned before the break, the letter of Archbishop Aquila in Denver, and he points out that this attempt has failed. The pews are still empty in the churches of those who try to reach out to the world without calling the world to conversion. And another bishop has also called out Cardinal McElroy on these same issues. This was just this week, Bishop Nauman of Kansas City. And so he's also written a public letter, and he also points to the example of Christ and the early Christians and the witness to the faith of Christian marriage. And the euphemisms of inclusion and welcome and being sensitive, really it's a guise for allowing sin to continue and not facing the hard truth that we have to repent of sin. And so it'd be certainly more honest if these men of the church who deny the church's sexual teaching, it'd be more honest if they just said, I disagree with Catholic teaching, but what they want to do is they want to change the teaching and practice of the church from within. And this is also the same agenda of the synodal process. Cardinal Mueller has been calling this out for months, and actually I think for over a year. And so, the idea that we need to open the doors of the church to sinners, don't call them to repent of sin, is really just to say we want to continue sinning, and we want to tell people that we're no longer going to uncomfortably preach to them that to fully live the Christian life, they need to give up their sins. But that's not the message of Christ. His first words are repent and believe in the gospel. So, these issues are not just local to San Diego. This is something I thought should be pointed out. To place this in context, really I think the whole synodal process that Cardinal McElroy is invoking. The whole thing in Europe, in America, in other parts of the world, it's being used to push changes in doctrine, and in which the doctrine has been definitively and long taught. We're talking about women's ordination of the priesthood, the sinfulness of homosexual acts, other teachings on sexual morality. Cardinal McElroy has invoked this process in a certain way because he's following the example of the other liberal bishops, especially in Europe, in Germany and Belgium, who are doing the exact same thing. And here in Rome, I see it all kind of come together because, the bishops' conferences of America, Belgium, Germany, they all come here. And just a few months ago, in November, we saw the German bishops kind of parade around Rome, flaunting their LGBT agenda and, women priests. I mean, they're going so far as I think their vice president has advocated for abortion. So, nothing's off the table for these men. Contraception's in there too. And they have support from cardinals in Rome. The Pontifical Academy for Life has been advocating for contraception now. Now they have several pro-abortion members on their faculty. And we've also seen recently, to place this in an even fuller context, a push to get this agenda in Africa. So our editor-in-chief, John Henry, just went to several African countries in which the bishop said, Holy Father's calling for decriminalizing sodomy, but this actually protects marriage in our country, and we're not okay with relaxing our laws. They've served us very well. So the resistance to this LGBT agenda and this overturning of the church's sexual morality, it's coming from Africa. It's also coming from faithful Catholic bishops in the States, as we've mentioned, and in Europe. But it is a fight, and it's a fight that is sweeping across the entire church.
We're running out of time here with Louis Knuffke from LifeSite, so we only have about a couple of minutes left. But this is causing grave scandal. The faithful are getting sick of this stuff. We asked the question: how did McCarrick rise to the Prince of the Church seat? How did he get the red hat there as cardinal? We all know he got defrocked. We all know that we'll probably never know because of that. And now we're asking, well, how do guys like McElroy get the red hat when he's clearly espousing heresy and issues within the church? He is espousing, well, maybe not heresy, I would probably be told is probably a too strong a term. I wouldn't agree, but nonetheless, at the very least, we can agree he is espousing very, very dangerous ideas that are harmful to souls, confusing to the faithful, and causing grave scandal and division within the church. How does this happen? You got about a minute and a half.
Well, first, I'd say I think it is explicit heresy. He's advocating that a man does not need to follow the commandments of God with regard to sexual morality in order to love God. That's been condemned numerous times. But yeah, I think it does raise many questions. I think the same questions we had about McCarrick, we should now be asking about McElroy. Not about, say, his personal life, but the teachings and practices that he's advocating for. So, yeah, we're not done with all the scandals that we've seen now among the episcopacy.
We are out of time. Louis Knuffke, we're very grateful for your time today. I apologize for the technical connection issues, but we have appreciated our conversation with you. I would encourage everyone to check out his articles over at LifeSite News, lifesitenews.com. Just you can search for Louis Knuffke, but I have placed a link to all of his articles in all of our live video feeds today on Rumble, on Facebook, on Twitter. Check them out. I'm also on LinkedIn. We're going to go into an after show when we say goodbye here. If you want to hang out and conversate directly about this or anything else, you're welcome welcome to do so. And don't forget, the ACT Insider email list is available to you as well. And I'm going to be in Buffalo 1 week from today. It's going to be a great time. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning for another round of A Catholic Take. Bold synthesis of information and inspiration. Until then, God bless you and God love you.